Whoa! Big breaking news
Understand a little bit more
of
about what this is. So again, this
Portland,
is a live
Oregon.
look. What people's signs say, I'm just going to leave that out there for you. That there could be something that shows up on there, but we'll come back to that shot here in just a minute. I'm Greg Nibbler here with Adrian Thomas, and Adrian, thank you, for joining us here. This is news that just came out about a half hour ago or less.
By the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. They were hearing the Trump administration's appeal of a temporary restraining order that a lower federal court had issued over a couple weeks ago about National Guard deployment to Portland. So lots of news coming out.
A lot of news coming out on this. So just to explain a little bit more about this. So this ruling is in response. So this was the Trump administration wanting to deploy the National Guard to that facility, to the ICE facility we were just looking at there in South Portland. The city of Portland and the state of Oregon, if I'm correct on that?
Yes, so then they immediately sued back in late September when that order came down. And essentially what happened is the judge in the lower district court here in Oregon issued a temporary restraining order, which that would essentially preserve the status quo, block the National Guard from appealing while that lawsuit plays out. Now, the Trump administration immediately appealed that temporary restraining order to the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, which is a higher court than the district court in Oregon. These are all federal courts we're talking about. And after about a week and a half of after hearing oral arguments, literally just within the last couple hours or last hour really, the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals basically issued a stay of that temporary restraining order, which that's legal terminology, pretty much saying that they're tossing that temporary restraining order out, and the National Guard can deploy to Portland while this legal process plays out. Just within, we're pouring through the ruling right now, and
which is there's a lot of pages to this here. I'm gonna pull this up just so we can have that shot there of the ICE facility live while we're doing this too. Are there some key things from this?
Well, really, on the second page of the order, the appellate court judges wrote that we conclude that it is likely that the president lawfully exercised his statutory authority under Title 10, which authorizes the federalization of the National Guard when the president is unable with regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. Now, those laws of the United States and those regular forces that they're referring to would be the federal law enforcement that work in and around the ICE facility. We should note that this appeals court, most appeals cases, they are a panel of usually 3 judges. There are a few dozen judges in the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. 2 of the judges in this case were appointed by President Trump. One of those judges was appointed by President Clinton, and this was a 2-to-1 ruling. And the judge that was appointed by President Clinton wrote a dissenting opinion, pretty much, citing essentially, with arguments that the city of Portland was making, that, the protests, while they've had moments of violence flaring up, it's still being handled on the local level. But in the ruling of the 2 judges who were appointed by President Trump, they basically went in chronological order over, since June, citing all of these different incidents of violence at the ICE facility. They even talked about ICE officers being doxxed, which essentially members of the public find out who these ICE agents are and follow them to their homes. So it was a this was not a unanimous decision on this between these appeals judges.
Yeah, the doxing ruling is interesting, or just citing that because that's not something happening at the facility. So it seems like
that's they're talking about the well-being of the officers. I mean, that was just one example.
Right. I mean, this is a very
they went talking about since June 2025, and they just multiple instances of talking about protesters setting the U.S. flag on fire. Like I mentioned, the Federal Protective Office, the Federal Protective Service officers and ICE officers being targets of doxing and just other vandalism happening at the property.
These are the 2 judges who were appointed by Trump,
correct,
by President Trump during his first term, and then again, It's 2-1. So there was a dissenting opinion on this from the other judge.
Correct. Yes.
Now, so we have this ruling, then essentially, so it overturns this appeal.
It overturns the temporary restraining order. Which means that, the overall lawsuit that the City of Portland and the State of Oregon filed against the Trump administration over National Guard deployment will play out in the lower district court here in Oregon. But while these court proceedings happen, the Trump administration can deploy the National Guard into the city if they so choose. And we're working right now to get more information. Our producers, our other crews are on this story today working to confirm, well, first off, the City of Portland's reaction to this, and as well as trying to figure out if we'll know when, if and when, we might see National Guard troops roll into the city. Okay,
and so they can be deployed. However, the other lawsuit is still playing out, which is over the legality of it to begin with, I believe, correct? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, the overall one. And that's starting up later this month. I'll try to get the exact date, but it's later this month. There's going to be a 3-day trial on that. But in the meantime, before that case happens, this is what this means, is that the National Guard can be deployed to Portland if the Trump administration so chooses to do so. We do have this reaction from the Oregon Attorney General, from Dan Rayfield. So I just got this right before we went on air, so I'm going to read it directly off of this as we go. This was his response. Today's ruling, if allowed to stand, would give the president unilateral power to put Oregon soldiers on our streets with almost no justification. We are on a dangerous path in America. Again, this is coming from Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield. Oregon joins Judge Graber in urging the full Ninth Circuit, apologies if I mispronounced that name, in urging the full Ninth Circuit to act swiftly and bonk to vacate the majority's order before the illegal deployment of troops under false pretenses can occur. And like her, we ask those who are watching this case unfold to retain faith in our judicial system for just a little while longer. And then it goes on from there. I'll finish it out here. Members of the Oregon National Guard are our neighbors, family members, and friends. Their safety is important. As a community, we need to come together and help make sure they are sent home as soon as possible. That means keeping Portland peaceful and safe while our fight in the court moves forward. So that is from the Attorney General of Oregon, Dan Rayfield. That's their response that just came out right before we came on air here. And as Adrian said, we're looking to get the City of Portland's response and more too. Specifically, though, I think the City of Portland and how that's going to play out. So to recap this, just where we're at, and Adrian's going through these documents right now, so we'll see what else he is finding here in just a second.
We have a whole team of people going through these today.
Yeah.
2 of our investigative producers who are excellent pouring through these documents because, there really was a lot, in the majority order by the 2 judges, along with the dissenting opinion, there was a lot of citing what had happened in California with the National Guard being deployed there. And in this case, or in that case, this same court, the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, made a similar ruling as we're seeing today, where they basically blocked the temporary restraining order of National Guard troops being deployed there, and National Guard troops were allowed to deploy into Los Angeles. When the lower court proceedings played out there, a federal judge found that the deployment was illegal.
Yeah.
But that ruling is also being appealed. But by the time all of that played out, the National Guard troops in California had already, done there, carried out their orders of protecting federal property. So this is a major development in this case today, and we could very well, have National Guard troops in Portland while the legality of their deployment plays out here in an Oregon district court.
Which is, so again, they're in California. There are those different facilities where the National Guard was deployed. So they were there. Yep, no, sorry. That's a lot of documents. By the way, if you're watching this live, like we're bringing you this live as literally Adrian's going through the document right now. So it is a lot of information that's coming through at the same time. So in that California case, so as you mentioned, eventually ruled not legal, but it really doesn't matter at that point. At that point,
it didn't really matter because the National Guard deployments, they're technically they're supposed to deploy for 60 days.
Yeah.
And at least in California's case and in Oregon's case, so by the time the legal process plays out, those deployments are essentially already over. It's more about just the overall legality of this. And
Right.
what's very interesting too is in Chicago, where there's another federal court case being played out over National Guard deployment. In that case, a judge, like in Portland, issued a temporary restraining order. However, the 7th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that temporary restraining order.
Interesting.
And the Trump administration late last week basically asked that case to go to the Supreme Court, citing the 9th Circuit Court ruling in California. And now that the 9th Circuit Court has also ruled in favor of the administration here, if the Supreme Court were to hear the case in Chicago, which they most likely will, because with these kinds of cases, there can't be different legal precedent in other parts of the country.
Yeah, it's
that
gotta be
ultimately
one.
has to go to the highest court in the land for the Supreme Court to decide. So this ruling today gives the administration more weight in terms of where else they might deploy the National Guard.
Now, does the fact that the Trump administration lost that eventual legal case in California, and there's still the one playing out here in Oregon, would that have any kind of a role in that?
So, I mean, that decision in California was
that just about that specific instance?
That was about that specific instance, and
Gotcha.
that decision is being appealed, but like I said, it already played out.
Yeah.
And now that the Supreme Court is getting involved with the case in Chicago, or potentially getting involved, we don't know yet if they'll officially hear the case, but the administration has asked the court. Yeah, most likely they will hear that case. And now that we have 2 appeals court rulings that rule in favor of the administration, it gives the Supreme Court lots to take in consideration. And if the Supreme Court makes a decision on National Guard deployment, that will set the ultimate precedent going forward.
And so, and as of right now, we know that the Trump administration is asking that, and that's talking about the 7th Circuit Court, so the Chicago case, to be heard. And we don't know yet when the Supreme Court, when or if technically the Supreme Court's going to be taking that up. I mean, not technically, we don't know when or if, but should they take that up, well, I guess we'll know more then. Yeah, I don't want to speculate too much on how long that'll take for them to do that.
Yeah.
But right now, here for Oregon, for Portland, the big question, it seems like, is, are they going to be deployed?
Yes, correct. Yeah, and what I was about to say, let's cut back to another live look at the ICE facility. Yeah, right now, we have one of our photographers, Eric, out there right now, kind of monitoring, and it seems pretty quiet right now. Maybe only a handful of people out there peacefully protesting at the moment, but we don't know what it might look like tomorrow. I mean, this decision essentially gives the administration the authority to deploy troops now. And like we mentioned earlier, we have crews and teams of producers working to try and get as much information as we can right now on, how the city of Portland is going to respond, along with if and when we might see National Guard troops in the city.
Yeah, I'm going to check here if any of our producers here behind the scenes know if we've heard from the city of Portland, if you could let me know. And okay, we have not heard from the city of Portland yet. But yeah, looking at the facility right now, you can see all the boarded up sections there around the entrances, and that's what we're going to be watching here all day. And have we heard from the National Guard at all?
That's another authority that we're working to get information from them too.
Okay.
So.
And again, this is all just played out here, this ruling 45 minutes ago. So we're still going over these documents to get more information, and we'll be back here throughout the afternoon, I'm sure, with updates as we hear from different organizations, whoever it may be, whether it's City of Portland, National Guard, whoever, about what possibly these next steps are, what happens now, and we'll be bringing that to you. And Adrian, thank you, for joining us too.
Yeah, lots.
All right, folks, I wanted you to hear the Portland media talking about what just happened here. A split 9th Circuit Court of Appeals in a 2-1 ruling ruled that the Trump administration can deploy National Guard troops to Portland, Oregon. 2 Trump-appointed judges, 1 Clinton judge, dissent. This was predicted, folks. This was predicted. But this is not over. It's not over. It still has to be litigated through the district court, the U.S. District Court, the District of Oregon. But in the meantime, they can be deployed. And they already been deployed. They're there. They're at a nearby base. But now they can come out. They can come out. In the meantime, this is a huge ruling, and they cited similar things to California in the justification of National Guard there. In the California case, they would document incidents of ICE agents, DHS agents getting attacked by mobs of people, protesters, rioters, whatever you want to call them, and using that as justification. The same thing applies here. I mean, I don't know what you saw on Saturday night here in this area after the No Kings protest on Saturday night, but I saw the worst of the worst of all these like crazy stuff in Portland, and it was crazy Portland back in 2020. But man, did you see the federal response to the protester rioters outside of the ICE facility Saturday night? There were gas and lasers flinging all over the place, tear gas all over. It looked like a literal war zone. It was the worst I've seen it ever in any. It was worse than 2020 things. It was bad. It was bad. But now the National Guard can come. Reaction, folks. Reaction to what's happening here. I'm looking at this court order. It's 93 pages. 93 pages. Now, this is going to eventually be litigated. It's also being here's what I think is going to happen here. I don't know. It's going to be very hard for a district court in Portland to reverse once they hear the merits and tell the National Guard to get off the streets at this point. They're out there. They're going to be out there. And I can't see how a district judge is going to reverse that. But even if it did, it would go back to the Court of Appeals, which will probably ultimately reverse it back. Maybe, maybe not. But the same issue's going on in Chicago. Now, that's a different circuit. That's the 7th Circuit. This is the 9th Circuit. Chicago, Illinois is the 7th Circuit. And it seems like the 7th Circuit is not having it. Seems like, Attorney General of Illinois, Pritzker and all them, state of Illinois, they are convincing a judge there because the judge is making so many restrictions against, the whole federal government being there. From the way they can handle protesters to they have to wear body cam to one judge telling them to take down the fence. And then the other one, no National Guard. So I think personally, folks, that it's going to possibly be split where the 7th Circuit ultimately rules in favor of the state of Illinois, while the 9th Circuit, rules in favor of the Trump administration. And then this all could go eventually to the Supreme Court. Just let the Supreme Court rule on this. And ultimately, I think the Supreme Court's going to allow the commander-in-chief to be able to deploy the National Guard. I can't see why not. U.S. Appeals Court lets Trump send troops to Portland. A divided United States Court of Appeals ruled on Monday that Donald Trump can send National Guard troops into Portland, Oregon, despite objections by the leaders of the city and state, giving the Republican president an important legal victory as he dispatches military forces to a growing number of Democratic-led cities. A 3-judge panel of the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals granted the Justice Department a request to put on hold a judge's order. That was Karin Immergut. Remember Karin Immergut? That was the judge. They put a hold on her order that had blocked the deployment while a legal challenge to Trump's action plays out. Portland-based U.S. District Judge Karin Immergut, who Trump appointed during his first term as president, ruled on October 4th that Trump likely acted unlawfully when he ordered troops into Portland. It goes on to say, one judge dissented with the other two who ruled in Trump's favor. Immergut, the judge, the U.S. District Judge, appointed by Trump, which is interesting, has blocked Trump from sending any National Guard troops to Portland at least until the end of October. I think it applies up to the 24th. And then on the 23rd, she was supposed to have a scheduling conference to decide if that restraining order should be granted for an additional 2 weeks. But it's interesting. I'm sure if National Guard troops going to be out there while this gets litigated, who knows how long this will be litigated for? It's supposed to be litigated sometime this month, but who knows if you file a bunch of paperwork and you can push this out. But who knows that if, the authorities here in Portland, whether it's the Attorney General for Oregon or the city of Portland itself, or files an additional restraining orders and tries to muddy the waters here. I think that could be a possibility here. I think they're going to be by all means necessary, bam, to stop the National Guard from coming in. You're so adamant not to get the National Guard in there. This is a victory. This is a victory for the Trump administration. And people in this chat have all sorts of opinions about the matter. All are welcome here. I have a position. I have an opinion. But a lot of you have different opinions. And it's cool. That's why we have conversations and we talk. Some people think Portland's fine. Some people think Portland you don't need National Guard into Portland. I've heard what the police chief Bob Day say at one point we're just talking about a very small city block here. But overall, Portland is fine. I get that argument. I get it because, over the weekend, there was the No Kings protest. They were saying that there was massive amount of people around the country. And yes, there was lots of people. And up to 7 million people protested around the country in cities all across the United States. But we have a population of almost 350 million. That only makes 2% of the population out there. It's really not a lot. If you think about it, yeah, it's a lot in numbers, but it's really not a lot. It's like a drop in the bucket. So, maybe Bob Day has a point here. Is it chaos and anarchy in all around Portland? I don't know. I'm not there. Can anyone, elaborate on that? So yeah, they're going to possibly have the National Guard out there today. They've already came. Now, I've seen something online saying that the court here, this was just in reference to Oregon National Guard, not Texas. So I have to look and see if does this apply to the Texas National Guard that was deployed. So I have to read more into this and find out. People are saying that a Ninth Circuit panel rules 2-1, 2 Trump appointees to 1 Clinton appointee, that Donald Trump can deploy the National Guard to the Oregon National Guard, to the ICE facility in Portland here, this location here. The Texas Guard remains blocked, however. I saw that. Ruling means the administration can deploy the Guard, but the Texas National Guard remains blocked. So it's not a full victory. Plus, this still has to be litigated. Still has to be litigated. Now, eventually, this is going to be litigated, all the way up through the courts. Eventually, I think at one point that they, the Supreme Court will hear it. Now, let's be real. The Texas National Guard was kind of deployed to circumvent that ruling, right? That's what they argued. They argued this, California and even Oregon argued in this case that the Texas National Guard was to circumvent the order. When Judge Immergut put that order not to deploy the National Guard, and then what the Trump administration did, which I feel was triggering California, was deploy the California National Guard up there to Portland and then Texas and other state National Guards. Just like what's happening in Illinois. They went there for Texas National Guard, went to Illinois. There was a big scandal, though. They were saying some of the National Guards were out of shape and they got ordered back to go back to Texas. But with this particular case, though, it will be interesting because it makes me wonder. It just makes me wonder about Oregon National Guard troops. Obviously, they have a legal obligation to comply with orders, right? Because they're federalized at this point, right? They're federalized. The President of the United States can federalize any National Guard, right? So it becomes the federal National Guard. Will the Oregon National Guard, will there be any troops there? I'm just wondering. I'm not saying it will happen, but it makes me wonder if there'll be any federal troops or any Oregon National Guard troops that put their arms down and not show up or say out of defiance, I'm going to side with my fellow Oregon. I don't know where they call it, Oregonians. I don't know, Oregon citizens, and say, hey, but I don't know. See, we don't know where we're going here. We don't know where this is going. We're in uncharted territory. Even though, National Guard has been deployed in cases in the past with disturbances and problems and issues, even the Insurrection Act itself. And that's another, speaking of Insurrection Act, that's another option the Trump administration has through this whole process, regardless of the courts, the Insurrection Act. And but I think one of the reasons why the Insurrection Act hasn't been invoked right now is because I think the Trump administration was feeling confident that the appeals court would ultimately rule in their favor. So they don't need the Insurrection Act at this point. Now, the same that just applied here today with this court ruling could be the same thing that an appeals court in Illinois could eventually rule on and allow the National Guard in there in the meantime, or the Supreme Court. I know the Trump administration has appealed to the Supreme Court specifically on the Chicago issue. The Supreme Court might say, hey, in the meantime, you're allowed to deploy the National Guard until this gets litigated, and we'll handle it once it gets litigated. If you don't like the outcome, the losing party can appeal and go up the chain of command and appeal. But again, we're in uncharted territory. We're on unprecedented times. You don't know, and I don't know what's going to happen here with this. We just don't know. And even if they were ordered, like the court here, will they come? Will they even come? Are they needed at this point? Looks pretty calm out there right now, but man, Saturday night was a complete war zone out there. It was crazy out there. People blocking traffic there, standing in front, and ICE and federal troops shooting off tear gas, pushing the crowd away. They congregate in front of that. See where all the wood is there, right there. Where that vehicle's going into the parking lot. Right. Look at this convoy. Might be the National Guard there. Maybe not. They don't really go out there in the daytime, though. They don't really go out there in the day, all like that. I haven't seen them out there. Outside of Portland, most of Oregon and their guardsmen are conservative. I was doing some research. I could not believe that Oregon doesn't even have sales tax. I was looking at different states, and I saw Oregon doesn't even have sales tax. I was like shocked. I was like, whoa. Eastern Oregon, whole different than Portland, right? Eastern area Oregon. I heard at one point that people in Eastern Oregon were trying to secede and try to separate. They were trying to join Idaho side. They were trying to join this. I don't know. It's this thing called the regrowth, that they were trying to create this old state and imply that Eastern Oregon wants to join Idaho. They don't even want to be involved with Portland anymore in the western part of Oregon anymore. Crazy. So yeah, this is going on. Just kind of sharing this ruling, what this means. Where do we go with this? What's going to happen? Are we going to see troops in the streets? Are we going to see troops beyond the ICE center, the ICE facility? Or are they going to be like actually roving or rolling around in groups of people in downtown Portland? This is not necessarily downtown. This is like South Portland. It's not far from downtown. It's not that far, but this is Portland. I want to get a couple clips from this weekend just to kind of show you the most craziest stuff in Portland over the weekend. It's absolutely insane. It was absolutely chaos. Let me see if I can find some specific clips. But over the weekend, it was just like, I'll do the News Nation report. A lot of people have clips, a lot of streamers there. But there was over the weekend, Saturday night, it was complete mayhem out there. So News Nation's going to be out there tonight. Ore Ventura Media, he just tweeted out, U.S. Appeals Court hands the Trump administration a victory. National Guard troops can be deployed to Portland. I'm here on the ground outside the ICE facility. Unclear if we'll see any protests tonight. this story is developing. People are passing around, and MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin is visibly upset after learning that the Ninth Circuit has just issued an emergency motion that authorized President Trump to deploy That is absolutely insane.
Oh my God. You have to kill me!
At least in this clash. And then some of the protesters are throwing back the flashbangs right back at the federal agents. But look at the scenes here. If you get a bit closer here, they have a strobe light, so it's kind of hard to see the roof of the agents on. There it is, the strobe light on again. Oh, wow.
And obviously we saw you, Jorge, rightfully put on your mask because this is still a lot of smoke in the air, as we can tell. I mean, while this is playing out and we continue to see these less lethal methods being used by these federal agents, things like tear gas and pepper balls, can you explain to the viewer what it's like to be in a scene like that and be exposed to those elements? Obviously, you put on the mask because even though you're not right there in the middle of the chaos, it is still affecting your eyes, your mouth, your lungs. What is it that you're experiencing that these protesters are experiencing?
Here, I'll show you in real time. So here, Alex, if you look at my face, I mean, that smoke stings. I mean, it goes right into your eyes and you get this burning sensation, almost like if you were crying. It goes right into your nose and your mouth and it just discombobulates you. And that sting is It's really powerful. And Alex, I've been covering protests for the last 7 years in all major cities, but I have not ever seen this amount of tear gas used by federal agents. I mean, just the clouds. We still have a massive crowd. If we could, I don't know if we could show there, Austin. I know they kind of dispersed a bit, but you still have this like massive crowd hanging around. So the night is still early. What's going to be interesting here, Alex, is at one point, will we see either state or local law enforcement move in and make arrests? We continue to hear warnings from local PD saying to clear out the roads or individuals will be subject to arrest, but for some odd reason, okay, look, we have some law enforcement here. Austin? All right, we have some
Okay,
state
we're going to
police now
take
arriving, here, Alex.
We're going to take
on
a
the ground.
second and let Jorge Ventura and his cameraman capture their breath. Obviously, we see reinforcements arriving. It looks as if this is local police that'll be there to try to secure the scene. Obviously, from the perspective of the local and state officials who don't want National Guard enforcement, they were going to want to get a hold of this scene. That's Jorge Ventura live in Portland. Much more News Nation Prime coming up after this.
That was over the weekend.
National Guard troops to Portland, Oregon. CNN law enforcement correspondent Whitney Wild is with us now. Whitney, what more do we know about this?
Well, there is a major victory for the Trump administration. They had sought to appeal this temporary restraining order that limited the National Guard's ability to be deployed in Portland. Originally, a district court judge had, as I said, put a restraining order on that, attempted to extend it. The Trump administration appealed, and for now, they are celebrating a major victory because this appeals court, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the three-judge panel who oversaw this case, has put a stay on that district court judge's order, which means that the Trump administration can deploy the National Guard troops to Portland to protect that ICE facility. This is an important win, again, for the Trump administration, but it is also significant when you look at the totality of how the judiciary around the country may look at similar cases. The Ninth Circuit is widely considered a more liberal circuit. The courts on the West Coast are largely considered more liberal courts. And so for the Ninth Circuit to give the Trump administration this win, that will put quite a bit of wind in their sails, Pamela, because they are facing other similar lawsuits in other districts throughout the country. One of the points that was made in the majority opinion here, it appears to suggest that there's a lack of assistance or maybe not enough assistance from the Portland Police Department. And as they are looking at the totality of the Trump administration's claims, the totality of a potential risk here, it appears that they do think that the Trump administration will likely win on appeal. And the reason I bring up the Portland assistance is because here in Chicago, the help from local law enforcement was one of the reasons that a judge issued a temporary restraining order on the National Guard being deployed in Chicago. And the point here, Pamela, is that as the judiciary looks at all of the factors here, what is the real risk to an ICE facility? What is the real responsibility for law enforcement in this area to protect them? They are considering the assistance they're getting from local law enforcement in deciding whether or not the National Guard is warranted here. And so, again, this is a major victory for the Trump administration. Our team is combing through this order now, as well as the dissent, to try to get, bring you the most detail about the reasoning here. This is a 57-page order, and the majority, the dissent was another 36 pages. So we're still combing through all of that. But Pamela, in the short term, this means that the Trump administration can deploy the National Guard to that ICE facility in Portland. Back to you.
All right, Whitney Wild, bringing us the latest on that. Thank you so much. And that ruling in Oregon comes just days after the No Kings protest that took place across the country this past weekend. And one of the issues for some of the protesters was this idea of sending the National Guard into cities. And we've heard President Trump dismiss them just today, calling them, quote, small. But according to the organizers, 7 million people took to the street Saturday to protest and what organizers describe as President Trump's, quote, authoritarian agenda. There were more than 2,000 rallies held across the country. Speaker Johnson characterizing these protests in a similar way and tying them to the ongoing government shutdown.
Now that Democrats have had their protest and publicity stunts, I just pray that they come to their senses and end this shutdown and reopen the government this week. Republicans are waiting, the American people are waiting, and we are ready to act.
All right, our panel is back here. We're also joined by retired Major General Randy Manner, the former acting vice chief of the National Guard. First of all, I'd like to go to you, Randy, on just this latest development that we just heard from Whitney Wild on the appeals court allowing the National Guard to go to that ICE facility in Portland, Oregon. What do you think?
I think it's very unfortunate anytime we have American troops in American cities for made-up reasons. I think it's something where if the administration is limiting those troops to only ICE facilities, that is still a small and major victory that the National Guardsmen cannot go anywhere that they want. So reluctantly, of course, the court has spoken, and therefore the National Guard will follow the legal orders of the administration.
It's interesting, just again, you know, that this crossover of the executive branch and the judicial branch on these really big, high stakes decisions that are unprecedented, right?
Really unprecedented. And what this came down to is this question of whether the federal government is unable to execute the laws of the United States without the intervention of the National Guard. Now, the argument that the lower court had made was that, well, of course, these are protests happening. They might impede, they might slow down the work of the government, but the government's deporting more people than ever before. They're doing just a fine job of carrying out their orders without the National Guard. So the appeals court here seemed to say, and we haven't looked fully through it, it just came in a second ago, but the appeal court seemed to say, well, no, this is getting in the way of the government's ability to do its job. That language, unable to execute its functions, is going to come up again, whether it's at the Supreme Court or whether it's with an appeal to the full Ninth Circuit, all 11 judges, which I think parties will almost certainly do. I think there's an open legal question still, but yeah.
I want to bring you in, Doug, because as I mentioned earlier, this idea of sending the National Guard into states against the will of the governors in these states, it's something that has galvanized some of the protesters that were out there in the No Kings protest, right? There was 7 million people around that, according to the organizers, and they were there. I mean, we had reporters there, and the people we spoke to, some of them very moderate views, they're really concerned that the country is sliding into an autocracy for different reasons. And then you have Speaker Johnson and other Republicans. I had Republican McLean on earlier, who were criticizing them and saying that they're communists and that they're small and that they're even anti-Semitic. What do you make of the way Republicans are handling this?
Look, they're going to follow the lead of Donald Trump and be dismissive of that. I don't think the protests were un-American. Protesting is very American. But I do think that they sort of took their eye off the ball here. And I say that because it was a beautiful weekend in Washington, D.C., and New York and Philadelphia this weekend. And all of those are just across a river from states that have very close gubernatorial races. And if I'm a Democrat, I want those people on one of those final Saturdays going into a campaign, not at a protest. I want them knocking on doors and making phone calls in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, in Union and Bergen County, New Jersey, certainly Northern Virginia. And by having them at a protest, when you're coming down to crunch time in a campaign, seems to me to take your eye off the ball. What I'd do instead is try and win those races as much as you can, have those volunteers on the ground, do your protest after those elections. If you're successful, then you can talk about the momentum. You can say, look, we've just won these races and all these people are fighting on the ground for us now. I think there's a real missed opportunity.
That's a great point, Doug. And it's not, and even if you take it out of New Jersey and Virginia where you've got governor's races, I think a refrain for many people is, okay, what now? You got 7 million people, what now? Did you collect everybody's emails and you're going to raise funds from them? Like, are you going to set up a phone chain and have them volunteering in 2028? What now? And yes, the energy and the activism and enthusiasm, you know, like you said, it's American and it's wonderful, but if people really care, even if it's not about those two races, like what, like today, like literally today on Monday, what, like, are people just still cleaning up the signs they made, or like what's next?
It's a fair point. I wonder what you think, Mo.
No, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. Just make sure you're walking and chewing gum. I don't disagree with that, right? 7 million people around the country, many of whom are not close to New Jersey, not close to Virginia, desperate for an outlet to show their disapproval with this president and his policies and his actions. The fact that they came together was fantastic. Now, what do you do with that energy moving forward is a key question. I also think that the president keeps giving them a reason to mobilize, not just with his actions, but we all remember, it wasn't that long ago, that the Republican Party ran an entire campaign against Hillary Clinton for using the word deplorables to describe some Trump voters. And politically, that was a smart thing for them to do. This president and the speaker and their allies are saying anyone who disapproves, anyone that showed up, and we all saw a lot of those protesters, little old ladies standing on street corners waving signs, are un-American and deserve to have excrement dropped on their heads, as the president showed in that AI video, right? If Democrats can actually use that to harness some of the same energy that Republicans did back in 2016, they just have to do it. They just have to figure out how to organize and mobilize these people.
Just a short time ago, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the Trump administration in a 2-1 vote. So what does that mean? And where does the state of Oregon and Portland go from here? We have plenty of questions, and joining me to answer some of them is Laura Appelman. She's the Van Winkle Melton Professor of Law at Willamette University. Laura, thanks for being with us. Let's start with this. Was the outcome of this a surprise to you?
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for having me. No, not at all. I think anyone who watched the hearing on the Ninth Circuit last week, it was pretty clear that Judge Nelson and Judge Bade were going to likely rule for the government, and that Judge Graber was going to write a dissent, and that is exactly what happened.
Well, let's talk about what was in this. It was a 93-page, 92-page opinion. You briefly reviewed that for us. You know, what are your takeaways from what the judges had to say?
Sure. Well, first part, most important for the binding law part, is what's called the per curiam opinion. So this is where two judges, again, Judge Nelson and Judge Bade, agreed, and they held, I mean, it was a long holding, but they held essentially that subsection 3 of 12406, which allows the president to federalize the National Guard, gives the president a tremendous discretion to do so, and thus the stay put on the president's initial grant of power to do so is dissolved. So the TRO that the district court extended last week below is now no longer in effect. Short, summary of that is that we can now send the Oregon National Guard to Portland.
Yes, so the appeal from the lower court from Judge Immergut has now been overturned, and Trump may now, as you mentioned, send the troops here to Portland as he wishes. Where can the state of Oregon and Portland go from here?
Well, in theory, the state of Oregon and Portland can try to appeal this to the Supreme Court. One of the things that I think is interesting about this opinion, there's sort of the first part, what's called the per curiam, where we have the two judges that agree, but then Judge Nelson actually wrote a concurring opinion. So an opinion where he explains what he believes is the Ninth Circuit reasoning for this. And he says that this should be something that's reviewable not by the courts or by political power. So actually, let me correct myself. I said the Supreme Court. What might happen next is that the Portland and Oregon may call for an en banc Ninth Circuit hearing. So since the Ninth Circuit is so large, that wouldn't be the entire Ninth Circuit. That would be probably 10 of the judges, plus, of course, the 3 original judges. So that's likely the next step.
I want to speak to that, as you mentioned. So Oregon's Attorney General Dan Rayfield did release a statement just in the last hour saying, quote, Oregon joins Judge Graber in urging the full Ninth Circuit to act swiftly en banc to vacate the majority's order before the illegal deployment of troops under false pretenses can occur. And like her, we ask those who are watching this case unfold to retain faith in our judicial system for just a little while longer. He also went on to say members of the Oregon National Guard are our neighbors, family members, and friends. Their safety is important. As a community, we need to come together and help make sure they are sent home as soon as possible. That means keeping Portland peaceful and safe while our fight in the court moves forward. So all of this is really complicated. I mean, it really is. I feel like I've gotten a lot of lessons in law recently. But what exactly would that look like then if you were using the en banc or en banc to vacate the majority? How would that work?
So essentially, once so Judge Graber can actually ask for an en banc. She's a senior judge, but she can still ask for a Ninth Circuit holding to be reviewed as long as you're on the panel. And so then the Ninth Circuit needs to decide whether it votes to grant that en banc. Now, again, normally in all other circuits, that's the entire judiciary, but because the Ninth Circuit is so large and has so many judges, they usually limit it to 10, and usually those hearings take place in San Francisco, although of course now you can do it on Zoom. And so I assume that the request has already been AG Rayfield and through Judge Graber, and so now I guess really the next step is we wait to see.
How long typically would that take?
I'm assuming that since all of this is deemed pretty time sensitive, that we will likely have an answer in the next couple of days, but there's no sort of set rule for this.
What does this say about the president's power when it comes to Section 12406 in other states as well?
Right. So in the Ninth Circuit, at least, and of course the Ninth Circuit involves Oregon, California, Washington, Idaho, Montana, Arizona. This means that the president's power, especially in Section 3, right? So Section 3 is when the president can federalize the National Guard because they're having difficulty enforcing the laws. That basically his power is, if not entirely unreviewable, highly discretionary. And this does seem to conflict a little bit with what the Ninth Circuit, a different Ninth Circuit panel, held in Newsom. And so it's not uncommon for there to be slightly different interpretations of things, both within a circuit and then, of course, outside of the circuit. But this is where, again, Judge Nelson's concurrence really spends a lot of time and actually goes back and talks about 3 tax rebellions, Shays Rebellion, the Whiskey Rebellion, et cetera, where what the predecessor to 12406 was used, and looking to what was the original intent, which Judge Nelson notes that should be the viewpoint as well, saying this is something where the president should not be cabined by the judiciary at all. This is the political process.
Can you remind viewers what Section 12406 is in layman's terms, and kind of what was the crux of the argument that these 2 judges sided with to allow this appeal to happen or stay?
Of course. So 12406 is the statute that allows the president to federalize the National Guard. And so there are 3 sections. Subsections, the one that we care about here is when the president federalizes the National Guard because the area or the people cannot uphold the law. Now, a lot of the actual opinion is very factually based. So they held that the district court committed error in the district court's interpretation of the facts, particularly in the sense of time framing. So that's a fancy word that means how far do we look back when we look at the September 27th, 28th order saying we need to federalize the National Guard. So Portland and Oregon said, well, right before that in September, things were very quiet. In fact, Judge Graber's dissent pointed out there were a 2-week period where virtually nothing was happening. The government and the president are saying, no, actually, if you look back towards June and July, there was a lot of unrest, and we need the National Guard to help. The other issue that they're arguing about, in sort of 2-to-1 fashion, is the Federal Protective Services sent 25% of its force to help support ICE to make sure everything is fairly calm. And so there's an argument, is that regular force or is that federal national force? And so the government is arguing because that takes the Federal Protective Services, those people away from their other work, they need something like the National Guard. Now, let me say, I think if the Oregon National Guard is sent to Portland, we will likely see an uptick in protests. In fact, we've seen an uptick in protests since September 28th, just for reacting. So
I wonder, did the justices or did the judges mention anything about that this may, or was that an argument in the case that this may cause more harm down the road?
No, this is just purely on the facts that had happened, not looking forward.
So, of course, we saw the Judge Immergut block the Oregon National Guard troops from deploying into Portland, and then we saw President Trump bring in troops from other states, including California. They are still training. They are on standby. How do they play a role here, and what does it mean for the troops from other states now?
Right. So this is why this case is incredibly complicated. So there were two temporary restraining orders. The first temporary restraining order on which this opinion today directly addresses is the Oregon National Guard, who are in Oregon, but of course not in Portland. The second temporary restraining order is on the California and Texas National Guards, which have also been sent to Oregon. And the Ninth Circuit held today that opinion deals with both temporary restraining orders, or TROs. And so if Oregon can come, also California and Texas can come. Although I think if Oregon can come here to Portland, I think the need for California and Texas will be moot.
So just to be clear, the ruling today basically stayed both of the temporary restraining orders that we saw weeks ago.
They dissolved them.
So both of those cases, the troops would be able to come in, whether from Oregon or in another state.
That's right.
Okay. I want to read some of Judge Graber's dissent now that we have here. She said, quote, "Today's decision is not merely absurd. It erodes core constitutional principles, including sovereign states' control over their states' militias and the people's First Amendment rights to assemble and to object to the government's policies and actions. I strenuously dissent." What stood out to you about her dissent and her opinions here?
Well, first, she, in general, her view of the facts really supports the district courts. But in the bit that you've just read to us and put on the screen, she is arguing a 10th Amendment argument. So the 10th Amendment, for those of you who don't strangely recall, says that all rights not used by the government are reserved to the states. And so she's arguing that this order of federalizing the National Guard is taking away Oregon's right to decide how to use its own state militia. And of course, this is also, I would say, a primary aspect of this case, but where does the federal government's power end? Where does the state's power begin? Because of course, this is not, as we've seen in the past, where the government of a state or a city has asked the National Guard to come in. This is the government forcing the National Guard in over the protests of both the mayor and the governor. And so I think that's why. And I think it's an interesting fact to note that Judge Graber is a longtime Oregonian, right? She sat on our Court of Appeal. She sat on our state Supreme Court. And so she is tied to the community in a lot of very important ways.
How would that differ from our two other judges, Nelson and Bate?
The two other judges they're more recently appointed in 2019, and neither of them are from Oregon, off my head, but they're not long-term Oregonians. And so not to say that a judge's opinions on this are totally driven by their backgrounds. I think all of the opinions are deeply steeped in fact and law, but I think my sense is that Judge Graber's strenuous dissent might also stem not just from her reading of the law and the facts, but also that she is an Oregonian who lives in Portland.
I think it's also important to note, right, though, that Judge Karin Immergut also is a Multnomah County judge,
right.
and she was also appointed by Trump. So she ruled against the government and in favor of the state of Oregon for, of course, that temporary restraining order. And so it is interesting to see that playing out differently.
Right. I mean, I think there's a lot of airtime of who is appointed to the Ninth Circuit or the District Court by what president. I think when these judges actually begin to serve, it means a lot less.
Do you anticipate that we will see more of these troop deployments now happening around the country now that we have had this ruling or this decision today?
I mean, I think it's possible. Of course, not all other circuits agree with the Ninth, at least this Ninth Circuit, but I think other circuits may say, if they feel it's correct, that yes, look, if there is trouble or protest outside of ICE facilities, that there's another circuit that is allowing the sending in of the National Guard over both the governor and the mayor of Portland. So I think it could definitely give support. Now, if we have lots of different circuits disagreeing, this might be something that the Supreme Court could pick up, but that I don't know.
We've been waiting for this ruling from the Ninth Circuit for a week and a half, so it's been a while. Yeah. What does that say to you about maybe what was going on behind the scenes with this?
First of all, I think for those people not sort of used to the pace of appellate courts, this is a really fast opinion. I mean, I was checking for this opinion about once an hour, roughly.
Yeah.
But this is quick. Now, again, this is sort of me reading the tea leaves with no personal knowledge. I think it's because not only do we have, a 3-judge panel, which is divided, but we have, as I said earlier, the per curiam opinion, which is a fancy way of saying 2 judges agree. And then not only do we have Judge Graber's lengthy dissent, but we have Judge Nelson's concurrence. And so what often happens in writing these opinions is that they are circulated. These 3 pieces of writing are not sort of written in secret and then sort of brought out. They circulate to each other. And so I'm sure there's been a lot of writing, a lot of rewriting, and I know the judges were all working very hard and very long hours, as most judges on the Ninth Circuit do.
It is interesting that you mentioned this is actually very quick, right? Because like you said, for us, it feels long. We wait every day. It's a big decision for people. I want to ask finally today, what does this say and how does this play a role into the larger lawsuit that we have from the state of Oregon and the government around this issue?
I mean, obviously, this is just a smaller facet of when you can, really focusing on what's the correct use of ordering the federalization of the National Guard. I do think it's interesting that one of the ways that Portland is trying to deal with the ICE facility entirely is zoning. Not only have they filed a zoning complaint against ICE for boarding up their windows, they are now also, and this is, I believe, in the New York Times today, filing a zoning complaint against the ICE building because evidently when ICE, decided to rent the building, it said it wouldn't hold people for longer than 14 days and it may be in violation. So some of this may actually come down to zoning and property law, which I think is not what people are thinking about when they think about protesting ICE and, the federalization of the National Guard.
Yeah, it feels like technicalities, right? Really.
Technical, although I will say that Oregon is famous for having very strict and very unique zoning. It's a very special Oregon thing. So if this is, for some reason, decided on zoning, that would be a very Oregon determination.
Laura Appelman with Willamette University, thanks so much for breaking this all down for us today.
Thanks so much.
We'll have much more on this story throughout the day on KGW Plus and coming up today at KGW News at 4. Thanks for watching. We'll see you then.
So wanted to put that into perspective there. A legal analyst just describing everything like that. Ultimately, this probably will go to the full Ninth Circuit, or at least a panel of, they got so many judges, like 11 judges. I don't know. It's more than the 3. And then they'll, rule on this collectively, and they could reverse it. But at the end of the day, folks, the end of the day, let's be real. Trump has the authority. President Trump or any president, whoever the president is, whether it was President Biden or all the presidents before, we go all the way back. The president of the United States has the authority to deploy the National Guard, period. That's it. It's that easy. And that's what ultimately I think it's going to, if it's going to go up all the way up the chain of command through the courts, the appellate courts, Supreme Court, that's what the Supreme Court's going to rule. It's just buying time. It's just buying time. Another thing I wanted to share is, one, Kristi Noem spoke today, and I'm going to play that in a second, and then we're going to wrap up. But Kristi Noem is saying that basically is they're going to go not only in Portland, but they're going to San Francisco. So keep our eyes on San Francisco, because I think the National Guard might end up going to San Francisco. But this building here, behind this, or on, you can't see it, but where this camera is facing the ICE building, there's like an apartment complex there, and it's what I learned this. One of the local medias was talking about it, and they were interviewing residents. It's supposed to house like low-income housing, and it has quite a few units there at this apartment complex. Right there at the corner there across the street. It's an apartment complex. It's new, and there's probably about 200, 300 people staying there. A lot of them are starting to complain about this crazy. They didn't sign up to be here at this, with this happening outside here. And a lot of them were claiming when the tear gas and everything gets launched off, all that tear gas is going in their windows and going in their vents and starting to cause them health problems and stuff like that. So my thinking here is we might possibly start seeing some lawsuits from the people that are staying in that building. That's, right there, that across from the ICE facility there, that apartment complex that's up there. So got to keep an eye on that too. Looks like they might try to go after them also for, zoning issues and all type of things, like you said, but it will be interesting. Let me play Kristi Noem here because she spoke today. She was down in Florida. I just got a brief clip of Kristi Noem about their intentions, the Department of Homeland Security. So I'm going to play that right here.
About the communication between ICE and local law enforcement agents that we would love to have local law enforcement across the country participating with us. Many times that's not true. Here in Sarasota, it's been fantastic. Here in Florida, it's been amazing. But you go into other communities and other states, and many times those governors are political. Those leaders in those towns, Portland's a great example of the mayor who chooses to play politics instead of keeping his citizens safe. Governor Pritzker in Illinois is putting his people in danger every day by going against us and not working with us to make sure that we're detaining individuals who have criminal charges against them or have been convicted and then re-releasing them out on the streets. We're starting to see better partnership out of some law enforcement officers who recognize that their citizens feel differently than their political leaders. Their citizens recognize that they want their streets safer. We saw that in Washington, D.C., that people that experience the freedom of being able to walk down a street, go to a restaurant again, be able to, conduct normal life and let their kids play in a playground, they enjoyed it, and they let their political leaders know that, and they've cooperated with us more. We continue to have targeted operations in many, many cities, but also very focused on those where challenges are still remaining, such as Portland, Chicago. We're in Memphis as well. We're going into San Francisco at the direction of the president as well. We're going to continue to make sure we're focused not just in those cities that we hear about on the news, but also cities like Sarasota, that we make sure that law enforcement officers in every single community get the chance to continue to get these criminals off of their streets. Is it true, though, the majority of arrests or detentions that are happening are people who are either low-level crimes, well, what would you call a low-level crime? I would say anybody who's been victimized by somebody who's committed a crime, it's significant to them. It's that's significant if they end up causing harm to someone. If they're not trained and don't have a license and they're on the street operating illegally, get into an accident, hurt someone, then that no longer is a low-level crime. We have laws, and we don't get to pick which ones matter and which ones don't. Every single one of our laws has been put in place for a reason, and therefore will be enforced. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for making sure that we're covering the good work that President Trump is doing and what he's doing to make sure that we're bringing people to justice for the crimes that they've committed. Right here in Sarasota, we've gotten murderers off the street, rapists, people who have committed crimes against children, and now today the people of Sarasota and in Florida and our country are safer because of it. May God bless each and every one of our law enforcement officers for the work that they do, and continue to go out and to thank them for what they're doing in the light of political attacks and threats from individuals that have an agenda. Thank them for standing up for freedom and for making sure that America can continue to be a safe country, but also a country of many liberties and blessings. God bless you.
Thoughts. It's a little out of sync there, but I wanted to share that their intention here is to go to different cities, including San Francisco. And it's also about crime, folks. It's also about crime. It will be very, very interesting to see. But we'll keep monitoring on what's going on in Portland tonight and going on the next couple of days. Could see National Guard out there tonight. If they come out on the streets, like mobilize and actually go out on the street. They're deployed. They're already been deployed. If they hit the streets tonight in Portland, we'll come out and break out and come back and watch it live in real time. Let us know what you think in the comments here. Thank you, everyone that contributed. MP, Jeff, Mo Skittle, thank you. We're monitoring what's happening here across the country with the National Guard deployment, crime, mass deportations, ICE protests, riots, you name it. We're covering it all. All right, folks, we cover it 24/7, 365. Make sure you hit that like, sub up, notification button. You never know when we'll pop up. We're on standby. Stay tuned, folks. Be safe out there. JLR Magnolia investigates. Be safe out there. Thanks for watching.